This is my video update from Athens, Greece on this Sunday afternoon, November the 19th. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with an opinion piece for the Washington Post written by Professor Joe Biden, the President of the United States. He wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. And basically, this article, penned by Professor Joe Biden, if you believe that, this opinion piece in the Washington Post, it basically lays out Biden's foreign policy strategy with regards to Project Ukraine, with regards to the Middle East and the war in Israel and Gaza, and just a little bit about the Asia Pacific and China. Just a little bit, like one or two sentences about the Asia Pacific and China. So all three of those foreign policy issues are in this Washington Post article. Most of it, if not 75, 80% of it, is focused on Israel and Gaza. A couple of paragraphs about Russia, Ukraine, the evil autocrat dictator of Russia known as the Putin. Joe Biden talks about how he's going to deal with the Putin. And the rest of it is pretty much about Israel and Gaza. And so this, let's start with the title. Let's start with the title of this article before I get into some of the main points of this article, written by Professor Joe Biden, if you believe that. The article from the Washington Post is Opinion Joe Biden. The U.S. won't back down from the challenge of Putin and Hamas. I love the image, the featured image of this article. It has a beautiful white dove soaring above the missiles on the ground. The beautiful white dove. The white dove signifies Joe Biden. Joe Biden's the white dove of peace, flying over the missiles, the evil missiles of the Putin. Okay, let's get serious now. Let's get serious. So let me read you some of this article. Joe Biden is President of the United States. That's the first sentence, everybody. Joe Biden is President of the United States. We continue. Today, the world faces an inflection point where the choices we make, including in the crisis in Europe and the Middle East, will determine the direction of our future for generations to come. What will our world look like on the other side of these conflicts? Will we deny Hamas the ability to carry out pure, unadulterated evil? Will Israelis and Palestinians one day live side by side in peace with two states for two people? Will we hold Vladimir Putin accountable for his aggression so the people of Ukraine can live free and Europe remains an anchor for global peace and security? And the overarching question, will we relentlessly pursue our positive vision for the future, or will we allow those who do not share our values to drag the world to a more dangerous and divided place? That is the question, everybody. That is the question. That is the question. I'm doing the Biden whisper. That's the Biden whisper. And the overarching question, will we relentlessly pursue our positive vision for the future? Or will we allow those who do not share our values to drag the world to a more dangerous and divided place? Name me one world leader who wants to be like Xi Jinping. Name me one. That's not in the article. We continue. We continue with this amazing, this absolutely amazing article, written, written by Joe Biden, if you believe that. Both Putin and Hamas are fighting to wipe a neighboring democracy off the map, and both Putin and Hamas hope to collapse broader regional stability and integration and take advantage of the ensuing disorder. America cannot and will not let that happen. For our own national security interests and for the good of the entire world, the United States is the essential nation. We rally allies and partners to stand up to aggressors and make progress towards a brighter, more peaceful future. The world looks to us to solve the problems of our time. That is the duty of leadership, and America will lead. For if we walk away from the challenges of today, the risk of conflict could spread, and the costs to address them will only rise. We will not let that happen. And I think that's pretty much the end of talking about Russia. I think maybe he mentions how in the article, the next paragraph, I think it mentions how Project Ukraine is a great investment for the United States, and let the Ukrainians fight the Russians so that the U.S. is kept safer, and Russia doesn't invade any countries like the Balkans or Poland or France or the UK or Argentina or Brazil or Ecuador. So that Russia stops invading all of these countries of the world. Biden says that the United States, we should give Ukraine all the money and all the weapons that it asks for, and it's a great investment. 3% of our defense budget is being spent destroying 50% of the Russian military. It's a great investment. It's an absolutely great. It is a great investment, everybody. It's a great investment. 3% destroys 50% of Russia's military. It's a great investment. Absolutely great investment, and Ukraine should just keep on fighting for the sake of Joe Biden. That was like the next paragraph. We've been over this before, so I'm not going to read it to you. Then he gets into his plan, his strategy for Gaza and for the Palestinians. To that end, the United States has proposed basic principles for how to move forward from the crisis, to give the world a foundation to which to build. To start, Gaza must never again be used as a platform for terrorism. There must be no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, no reoccupation, no siege or blockade, and no reduction in territory. And after this war is over, the voices of Palestinian people and their aspirations must be at the center of post-crisis governance in Gaza. As we strive for peace, Gaza and the West Bank should be reunited under a single governance structure, ultimately under revitalized Palestinian Authority, as we all work towards a two-state solution. I have been emphatic with Israel's leaders that extremist violence against Palestinians in the West Bank must stop, and those committing the violence must be held accountable. The United States is prepared to take our own steps, including issuing visa bans against extremists attacking civilians in the West Bank. The international community must commit resources to support the people of Gaza in the immediate aftermath of the crisis, including interim security measures, and establish a reconstruction mechanism to sustainably meet Gaza's long-term needs. And it is imperative that no terrorist threats ever again emanate from Gaza or the West Bank. So that's Biden's plan for Gaza, for the Palestinians, actually. The Palestinian Authority, one authority, the West Bank, Gaza, two-state solution. He doesn't get into any details about that, and international support for these principles, for this idea. No blockade, no siege, no reduction of territory, no reoccupation. He says it, a two-state solution. All of this once the war is over. Honestly, nothing new than much of the international community is proposing with regards to a two-state solution. Biden doesn't really propose any new ideas here. He just kind of repeats what a two-state solution might look like or could look like. Perhaps it's significant that Biden, in this opinion that he penned and he wrote, if you believe that, perhaps it's important that Biden is indeed putting it down on paper that he supports a two-state solution. But that's pretty much it. That's Biden's principles. Those are Biden's basic principles for how to move forward from the crisis in Gaza. And the Washington Post, they also reported that Professor Biden, the United States, is close to a deal with Israel and Hamas to pause the conflict and free some hostages. According to the Washington Post, we could be looking at a 5-day pause. Perhaps 50 hostages could be released. And that's the deal. That is the deal that may be put together in the next few days under the terms of a detailed 6-page agreement. All parties to the conflict would freeze combat operations for at least 5 days, while an initial 50 or more hostages are released in smaller batches every 24 hours. It was not immediately clear how many of the 239 people believed to be in the captivity in Gaza would be released under the deal. Overhead surveillance would monitor movement to the ground to police the pause. The stop in fighting is also intended to allow a significant increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance, including fuel, to enter the besieged enclave from Egypt. So it looks like, according to the Washington Post and according to these officials, it looks like we could be heading towards a significant pause. 5 days is pretty significant. So we'll see. We'll see if Biden finally convinced Netanyahu for this 5-day pause or ceasefire, if we could say that word. I don't know if we could say the C word, ceasefire, but maybe he finally got that concession from Netanyahu. Netanyahu, Israel is under a lot of pressure for a ceasefire, under a tremendous amount of pressure. So that is the Washington Post reporting about that. And who do you think wrote that opinion piece in the Washington Post? Who do you think wrote it? Because it definitely was not Professor Biden. Given the fact that you had a lot of trying to connect Putin to Hamas, there was a lot of that. But you also have the fact that it was only about 25% of the article was about Russia. Most of it was about Gaza and just a sentence or two about China and containing China. I would say that it wasn't Biden. Definitely wasn't Biden, because if Biden could write an article, if he had the ability to actually write more than a couple of words, I would imagine that Biden would be all in with regards to Project Ukraine, because that's the conflict, that's the war that's near and dear to his heart. That's his obsession. His obsession is Putin and Project Ukraine. So I'm thinking, given the makeup of the article, given some of the connections that it tries to create, Putin, Hamas, and all of that stuff, given these principles for Gaza, once the war ends, I would say we're looking at Sullivan or Blinken, maybe Blinken. Either Blinken or Sullivan, one of those two guys, wrote this article, pretending to be Biden. That would be my guess. So let's talk about the conflict that is near and dear to Biden's heart, which is Project Ukraine, a country for which Biden was at one point in time the viceroy, the overseer, the de facto president at one point in time. That's what Obama appointed Biden as, the man in charge of Project Ukraine. He was the Ukraine czar, just like Kamala Harris was the border czar. Obama appointed Biden in 2014 after they overthrew the democratically elected government of Yanukovych, Obama appointed Biden as the Ukraine czar. So that's why Biden is he's so interested, so emotional, and so connected to Ukraine. But it's not going well. It is not going well, Professor Biden. More collective West media is sounding the alarm bells, and they are finally starting to report some of the truth that we have been reporting on for the last year and a half, 2 years. Here is a title from Le Monde. A perfect storm is brewing for Ukraine and its allies. Negative developments everywhere are converging. Ukraine and its allies have entered a difficult military, diplomatic, and economic phase. Russia is taking advantage of this. Basically, this article talks about how Ukraine is losing. They're losing the war, the actual battle. Their economy's in shambles. Much of the media now is paying attention to the war in the Middle East, in Israel. The collective West is running out of money. The article says that the collective West is running out of weapons. They've been demilitarized. The collective West doesn't have the ability to keep up with Russia's production. Russia's economy is booming. Putin is more popular than ever. Russia is more popular than ever. And that's basically what this article talks about. That's it. That's the perfect storm. The perfect storm is that Ukraine and the collective West, they are losing this war from every direction. So that is the article from Le Monde. Le Monde is preparing the people of France for the eventual news that Russia has won the conflict in Ukraine. They're preparing the people of France for this eventuality. So that's what this article is really about, trying to create a very soft landing for the people of France who have bought into the narrative that Ukraine is winning and the Russian economy is in tatters, and the siege of Kiev and the ghost of Kiev and the Zaporozhye Avenger and all of this stuff. Zelensky is the next Churchill, and Zelensky is who was Zelensky? Who did they compare Zelensky to? Was Zelensky Napoleon, or who was Zelensky? Anyway, I forgot who they compared Zelensky to. The greatest general in all of history. Anyway, they're preparing a very soft landing for all of those people that actually believed that fake news. CNN, they have an article with the title, "As the War Grinds On, Ukraine Needs More Troops. Not everyone is ready to enlist." This article from CNN, wow, this is an interesting article from CNN. Basically, this article from CNN says that Ukraine is running out of troops. It's running out. No more troops left. It says that everyone is hyper-focused. Let me back up a bit. It says that everyone is hyper-focused on artillery and weapons production, but it says that even more important than the actual weapon production and the artillery and stuff like that, F-16s and tanks, what's more important is actual soldiers. And in this instance, CNN says Ukraine is running out of soldiers, whether you're talking about professional military, a contracted military, whether you're talking about mercenaries, whether you're talking about new recruits, women being recruited into the military, Ukraine is running out. Ukraine is running out. And that's what this article is basically saying. And it doesn't know how Ukraine is going to deal with this. CNN is basically saying that Ukraine doesn't have any easy answers to this critical problem. And it interviews people. It interviews like this woman who has like a shop or something like that, and she's like, if I have to fight, I'll go fight. It interviews someone who who's suffering health issues, but he tries to help the Ukraine military another way, like he helps them with I think some technical stuff, like he does some work for the Ukraine military, not on the front lines, but in administrative positions. But he can't go to the front lines because he has a medical issue. But he's like, look, if I have to go to the front lines, even though I have a medical issue, I'll go. What can I do? He's like, I'm trying to help out the best I can. And then it actually interviews people who have been to the front lines and have returned home, and it interviews people who have been to the front lines and have been injured. And all of them have their opinion as to how to deal with the shortage of soldiers. It interviews one IT guy, like a computer programmer, and this computer programmer was like, he tells CNN, he's like, look, I'm a computer programmer. I do pretty well for myself, and that's how I contribute to Ukraine by paying taxes and contributing to the state in that way. He's like, there is no way. The computer programmer was like, there's no way I'm going to go to the front lines to fight. Not going to happen. And he just pretty much tells CNN, we're not going to win this thing. He's like, we're not going to win this thing. Russia's bigger. They're more powerful. They're outproducing us. We're not going to win. And he's like, why should I go there? Why should I go to the front lines and die? He's like, I'm helping Ukraine by paying my taxes, by making good money as an IT guy and paying my taxes. So it's an interesting article. It's a very interesting article, an interesting admission, an interesting way for CNN to admit that Ukraine is running out of soldiers. Let me read you one account from this article. One of the people who was interviewed. He said this guy was he was fighting on the front lines and then he got injured. So they interviewed him, and he said, my platoon was short of people, so we were replenished with foreign fighters, 12 in total. For some, it was the romance of war. For others, it was a professional activity. Many of such people are now coming to Ukraine because it is a good line in their resume. As a rule, they do not realize what they are getting into. Many people imagine our war as a gunfight with the enemy, but they don't realize how much artillery there is, and that you sit under artillery fire all day, every day, and may not see the enemy at all. Foreigners are a different story because they can easily terminate a contract, unlike Ukrainians. It happened to me. Almost half of the people saw everything and said, no, this is too much. This is not the kind of war we signed up for. And then he talks about how a lot of the mercenaries, once they saw that this war was the real deal, they were like, I'm out of here. So I thought that was an interesting account of what's going on the front lines from this guy interviewed by CNN. Even the mercenaries are hesitant about fighting in this conflict. So Zelensky can't even put together a mercenary army at this point in time. And then we have the Telegraph. The Telegraph came out with an article with the title, "To Defeat Russia Once and for All, We Must Make Ukraine a Member of NATO. A bloody stalemate or worse beckons unless the West sees Kiev must speedily join the alliance." And this is written by Lord Ashcroft. That's how you know this is a serious article. Whenever it's written by a lord, then you know this is a very, very serious article. And basically, Lord Ashcroft, it's in the title. He says that NATO has to admit Ukraine because that's the only way that they can save Project Ukraine. He says that he has been to Ukraine 4 or 5 times, and he's interviewed a bunch of people. Lord Ashcroft has, and basically he says that everyone that he's interviewed, they all say the same thing. They say we can defeat Russia if we get a whole bunch of F-16s and a whole bunch of tanks and a whole bunch of artillery and a whole bunch of ammunition and a whole bunch of guns. If we get all of these things, the Death Star, laser beams, if we get all of these things, then we can definitely beat Russia, right? That's what they told him. But Lord Ashcroft came to the conclusion, because he's a lord, he's very smart. He came to the conclusion that most likely the Ukraine military is not going to get through 200, 300 F-16s, and most likely they're not going to get the Death Star and laser beams and stuff like that. So he's like, that's not going to happen. And he said that what awaits Ukraine are two terrible, terrible options. The first option is that Ukraine capitulates. They surrender to Russia, in which case they lose territory and they lose the conflict, and Russia dictates terms, and is a disaster for Ukraine, a disaster for Europe, a disaster for NATO, a disaster for Joe Bidenopolis, Greece's favorite son, a disaster for everyone, a disaster for Rishi Sunak, a disaster for Bojo the Clown, a disaster for Lord Cameron, a disaster. It's a disaster for everybody, right? So that's option one. He said the second option, the second terrible option, according to Lord Ashcroft, is that the war just keeps on going on, and he basically just comes out and says the Ukraine military is just going to get annihilated. A war of attrition. Russia has all the advantages, and over time, the Ukraine military just gets ground down to nothing. In which case, he says, Russia also wins. Disaster. Disaster for everyone, according to Lord Ashcroft. But Lord Ashcroft, he has a third option. He said, hold on. Lord Ashcroft says, whoa. Wait 1 minute, everybody. I've got an amazing idea, is what Lord Ashcroft is saying in this article. I have got an amazing idea. There's a third option. What if, now just hear me out. I'm Lord Ashcroft, so hear me out. What if we allow Ukraine into NATO? Fast track Ukraine into NATO. They've already started the accession process into the European Union, but Lord Ashcroft says in this article, the European Union is really not that important for Ukraine at this moment. What is really important for Ukraine is getting into NATO. They get into NATO, he says, and once they're into NATO, it's game over for Putin, because Putin would never, ever dare to take on NATO. And NATO can put soldiers on the ground, and you have NATO's military, and you solve the soldier problem, you solve the weapons problem, you solve everything, because it's NATO. Yeah, you break all of NATO's rules, but rules were made to be broken. So that is Lord Ashcroft's brilliant idea. And the last paragraph, he says, allowing Ukraine to have full membership of NATO and the risks that go with it are surely better than allowing a power as evil as Putin led Russia to absorb parts or even all of Ukraine. That would be both a betrayal of Kiev and would undoubtedly send the wrong message to the world at a time when global peace has rarely been more fragile. The opening paragraph, listen to the opening paragraphs from Lord Ashcroft. That's how you know this is the real deal. He's a lord. It is widely accepted that truth is the first casualty of war. The conflict in Ukraine is no exception. One of the most common lies being spouted by Vladimir Putin and his cronies is that Russia is effectively at war with NATO. This makes it more acceptable to explain to the mother or widow of yet another young Russian conscript killed in battle that he is portrayed as a heroic patriot fighting to protect his homeland from the might of more than 30 Western nations. The truth, of course, is very different. On February 24th last year, Russia attempted an unprovoked, it's always unprovoked, full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the belief that it could overrun its smaller neighbor within days and with no significant NATO response. That's the truth of what happened, everybody. It was unprovoked. And the big lie from Putin propagandists is that Russia is fighting NATO or a NATO proxy. That's the big lie. When in fact it's Russia, it's just Ukraine, no one else, nothing else. Forget about the fact that 28, 38 countries, whatever the number is, forget the fact that they've sent mercenaries to Ukraine, forget the fact that they've that they've sent weapons, all their weapons, some countries all their weapons, their entire military stockpile. Some countries have given away their entire military stockpile to Ukraine. Forget the fact that Ukraine has received, what, 280 billion, 380 billion in financial aid over a year and a half. Forget the fact that Ukraine has received Storm Shadow missiles and ATACMS and HIMARS and Scalps and everything. Forget that as well. Just forget all of that. It's just Russia versus Ukraine. It's just Russia versus Ukraine. That's it. That's it. This is not a NATO proxy. No way, no chance, no how. Because if this was a NATO proxy, well, Russia would be wiped out in a day, according to Lord Ashcroft. You see, Lord Ashcroft, he has to write an article like this to protect NATO. Because if people knew the real truth, which is that Russia has defeated NATO in Ukraine, not once, but 3 times, they've defeated 3 NATO militaries, well then that would tarnish the business known as NATO, wouldn't it? Can't have that. So yeah, that's the article from Lord Ashcroft. Since we're talking a little bit about Ukraine entering the EU, we have reports that 4 countries are going to be against Ukraine entering the European Union. Talks are going to take place in December, and every country has to vote yes in order to, every country has to vote yes in December in order to begin the accession talks with Ukraine. So in December, all the member states of the European Union, the 27 member states, they're going to vote whether the talks with Ukraine start. And the word is that 2 countries will absolutely vote no. And those 2 countries are Hungary and Austria. Well, maybe Austria, but definitely Hungary. For sure, Austria will be obstructive to Ukraine's integration, but it will hide behind Hungary. And despite its new rhetoric, France doesn't really want Ukraine in the EU, and Germany is playing a cynical game. This is according to an anonymous EU diplomat. So basically, it's Austria, Hungary, France, Germany, I imagine Slovakia as well. 5 countries that are going to put up some opposition for Ukraine entering the EU. But you know what's going to happen. France is going to be too chicken to say anything, so they're just going to go along and vote yes. Germany is going to definitely be too chicken to say anything. That's for sure. And they're going to vote yes. Austria is going to fold, and they're going to vote yes, because at the end of the day, they're going to be too chicken. And so they're just going to all depend on the one country that actually has some cojones. And that's going to be Hungary. And Hungary's going to either vote yes or no. Most likely they'll vote no. And maybe Slovakia too. Maybe Slovakia will join Hungary, because Slovakia also now has some cojones. And maybe it'll be Hungary and Slovakia that will vote no, and that's going to be a relief to Germany, France, and Austria. Because what they're worried about is that it's going to cost a lot of money for Ukraine to enter the European Union, and you know who is going to be on the hook to fund Ukraine as it enters the European Union. It's going to be Germany. Germany, France, Austria, Netherlands. They're going to pay for Ukraine, and they're going to pay a lot. It is going to be expensive, very expensive, to integrate not only Ukraine, but we're talking about Moldova, maybe Georgia, maybe Bosnia. Whew, is it going to be expensive? Boy, oh boy. And Orban, he was giving a speech the other day, and he said that Ukraine is light years away from joining the European Union, an indication of where Hungary is going to, what Hungary is going to vote come December. Our task will be to correct the mistaken promise to start negotiations with Ukraine, since Ukraine is now light years away from the European Union. That is what Orban said. And it's interesting. Orban is trying to preserve the European Union. He's trying to save the EU from a financial catastrophe. right? He understands that letting Ukraine into the EU is a financial, a social, economic, everything. It's a complete disaster, right? He understands this. So he's trying to save the EU from making a huge mistake. He's trying to preserve the EU while at the same time, the EU is trying to destroy Orban, right? And they owe Orban, they owe Hungary a whole ton of money. They owe Hungary something like 22 billion euros, right? So they've stolen Hungary's money. They've confiscated Hungary's money. They're holding it. They're holding it ransom. They don't give it back. Orban, he is trying to save the European Union by preventing the EU from making a terrible mistake. And the EU is trying to destroy Orban and get him out of the way so they can keep the money and make that terrible mistake. It's completely bizarre, man. Completely bizarre. And the Hungarian foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, he said that the European leaders, they really don't understand the conflict in Ukraine. They don't understand what's going on because they think of it like a video game. He basically said that they view the conflict in Ukraine like a video game, like Fortnite. That is what Peter Szijjártó said. A significant part of the European political elite has practically lost common sense. Some people imagine themselves in Fortnite, Szijjártó said at a political event in Budapest. They suffer from military psychosis and for some mysterious reason believe that arms shipments can bring peace. It is clear to us that we need peace instead of weapons. Whoever brings weapons into our neighborhood prolongs the war, and the longer the war, the more people will die and greater destruction will occur. So that is the statement from Hungary's foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó. And I bet you that Peter Szijjártó is 100% spot on in his assessment as to how EU leaders view the conflict in Ukraine. I bet you they really do think of this as one big video game, something like Fortnite. That would not surprise me one bit. Anyway, let me see if I have a clown world. I don't really think I have a clown world for today. From TASS news agency, Ukrainian military pilot defects to Russia. A military pilot with the armed forces of Ukraine has come to Russia, TASS reported on Saturday, citing a person who allegedly organized the pilot's flight over the front lines. The Ukrainian pilot in question is an active duty serviceman who held the rank of senior officer with Kiev's forces, a Russian Telegram channel following this situation has claimed. The ghost of Kiev. The ghost of Kiev defected to Russia. That's huge news. The ghost of Kiev is now with the Russian Air Force. Who's next? The Zaporozhye Avenger or the goat? The goat of Kiev. Maybe the goat of Kiev will make its way to Russia. All right, that's the video, everybody. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. 20% off. Use the code, the Duran 20. Take care.